Have you ever wondered how a community actually plans for growth? Like, for a whole year? Well, today we're pulling back the curtain on something really special. It's a blueprint from a community called the Brookfield Church, and it lays out their entire plan for 2025. Their big focus? Leading others to faith. And let me tell you, getting a look at this kind of intentional, long-term planning is, well, it's pretty rare.
So that brings up a massive question, right? How do you take this big, inspiring vision and actually turn it into a practical, step-by-step journey for hundreds of people? I mean, how do you make sure every single step builds on the one before it so you get real, genuine momentum? That's the puzzle we're going to piece together today.
Yet we're really treating this whole thing like a blueprint. This isn't some high-level abstract theory. No, this is a real-world case study. We get to see the actual architecture of their year, from the very first foundation blocks they laid all the way to the more complex stuff they built later on. It's so methodical, and honestly, seeing it all laid out like this it's just incredibly cool.
Okay, so where do you start with a plan this big? Well, just like any good building, you start with a solid foundation. And for this journey, that meant looking inward first. The idea was simple. Before you can lead anyone else, you've got to know where you're going yourself. They called this whole first phase learning to walk in the light. In this verse from Psalms, this was basically the anchor for the entire year. Their theme for January was Illuminating the Path, and it was all built on this really simple but, wow, powerful idea. You just can't guide someone else if you're stumbling around in the dark, right? You need a light for your own feet first. And for them, that light was Scripture. And this is where you really see how methodical they were. I mean, they didn't just throw around the word light vaguely. Oh no, they broke it down week by week. First, they focused on the light of salvation. Then the light of forgiveness. After that, the light we follow, the truth. And finally, they locked it all in with the guiding light of Scripture. See how that works? Each step just perfectly builds on the last. It's such a solid base. All right, so now that the foundation is set, what's next? Well, the focus shifts. It moves from inward reflection to outward action. The whole journey pivots from just walking in the light to actually sharing that light with everyone else.
And you can see the progression so clearly here. In February, it was all about the why, focusing on compassion. Then March was the how, learning to have those courageous but graceful conversations. And then in April, they tackled the what-ifs, getting ready to answer the tough questions. It's just this perfect, natural buildup of skills. Now, this was a super important point they hit on in March. They talked about this real tension you can have in communication. Think about it. On the one hand, if you've got all truth but no love, you just come off as harsh and you can push people away. But on the other hand, if you're all love and no truth, well, that can be kind of empty and misleading. So finding that sweet spot, that balance, that was everything. So when you boil it all down, the first quarter was built on these three huge ideas. 1, light leads the way. 2, love plants the seed. And 3, courage speaks the truth. What a powerful combination, right? That really set the stage for the entire rest of the year. But let's be real, any journey of growth is going to have its challenges, right? And what's so cool about this blueprint is that they didn't shy away from that. They acknowledged it head on. The next phase was all about confronting those internal roadblocks we all face. Fear, doubt, all that stuff. They didn't just ignore it. They actually built time into the year to work through it. And listen to how they introduced this whole topic with this incredibly raw, honest quote. "I believe, help my unbelief." I mean, wow. That just perfectly frames doubt not as some kind of failure, but as a real honest part of the journey. It's saying, hey, I'm struggling here. And the whole idea was that bringing that honesty forward is actually a huge sign of strength.
And their approach was really smart. In May, they focused on fear, teaching people how to shift their focus away from their circumstances. Then in August, they took on doubt, basically encouraging people to bring their honest questions. The big takeaway here is that they reframed the whole thing. These struggles weren't seen as failures, they were opportunities. Admitting your weakness was the first step to finding real strength.
Okay, so after building the foundation, learning how to act, and even working through those internal challenges, the journey hits its final and maybe most important stage. The focus shifts again. It's no longer just about individual skills. It's about building something that lasts. It's about creating a whole culture of growth. This was really the grand finale of the entire year's plan. And the big word here was discipleship. But pay attention to their definition because it's not what you might think. It wasn't a class you take or a program you check off a list. Nope. They defined it as a continuous, lifelong journey. The whole idea is that you follow an example so closely that you become an example for the next person. It's all about relationships, and it never really ends.
And they didn't just hope this culture would magically appear. It was a very deliberate process. They started small in July, focusing on one-on-one mentorship. Then, by September, they scaled it up, trying to make it a community-wide thing. And finally, in October, it was all about nurturing that new growth, making sure the system could sustain itself for the long haul.
And this quote right here, it just perfectly nails the end goal. It's all about creating this amazing, virtuous cycle. You teach one person, who then gets equipped to teach another person, and on it goes. The ultimate goal wasn't just to help one person grow, but to create a whole community that could keep growing and multiplying on its own. What a vision, right?
So we've walked through this entire year-long blueprint. We've seen the foundation, the action, the challenges, and the culture building. So what's the big takeaway from all this? What's the one core lesson we can pull from this incredible journey? It's a big one, and it really changes how you think about progress. And here it is, maybe the most important lesson of all. Growth isn't a destination. It's not a finish line you cross. It is the journey. The whole point of this entire year-long plan was to get people to understand that spiritual growth is this living, breathing, ongoing process. You never really arrive. You just keep walking. And that leaves us with one final thought. A question, really. If growth really is a journey and not a destination, then that forces us to ask ourselves, what's the next step? Not the last step, not the end goal, but just the very next one. It brings the focus right back to today, to the one intentional choice we can make to keep moving. So what does that next step look like for you?